The right to offend is not some pesky little part of freedom of speech that we have to put up with. It is the heart and soul and lungs of freedom of speech. It is the coursing lifeblood of human progress. It is the instigator of liberty and modernity and science and understanding. What a laughing stock today's student leaders are, that they can so casually dismiss the right to be offensive without realizing that their lovely, enlightened lives are the gift of individuals who gave offense. Offensiveness is not just something we have to begrudgingly accept. Offensiveness is the motor of human progress.
Well, hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Monday edition of the Whitfield Report on a Tuesday, or at least that's when this will be airing. And actually trying a new setup on my iPad using the Riverside app for this episode. So that's why things look a little different. I like the new, studio. It's pretty neat. I wanted to try this out too, just to see what the setup would be like, when I'm traveling, since I don't want to take my MacBook and the microphone and all that when I travel, if I do a remote like podcast or something. So figured I would try that for this one, and let's see how it goes. Also, I am still getting over a little bit of a cold, so I do have a cough drop in. I know it's not the most professional maybe, but you guys know, we're gonna push through it and still have a good show. Today's topic, ladies and gentlemen, isn't really a political topic per se, or a pop culture one. I don't have an interview today, although I will have one coming up next week that I will announce at the end of the program today, so stay tuned for that. But I just figured I would talk with you guys one-on-one and cover something that's kind of near to my heart, or rather a milestone of sorts. And that milestone, folks, is as of this week I am celebrating my 11th anniversary of when I moved to Florida. August 26th, I believe, of 2013 was the date in which I moved to Florida. Last year in 2023, I did the 10-year anniversary. That was the big milestone, and I did a little bit of a show where I covered the experience of moving to Florida and what was behind that decision and all that. And for those who, need a refresher on that, just kind of real quick. When I was a senior in high school, I was living in Colorado. For those of you who are newer to the program, I'm originally from Denver, Colorado, born and raised, sixth generation Colorado native, actually. And growing up, Colorado was a pretty decent state. I was raised in a pretty good area, lived in a good district, all that. Denver was a pretty cool place to grow up. I had friends who I loved dearly and who I still keep in contact with today, who I went, elementary, middle, and high school with. And some of them still live in Denver. A lot of them also moved to other states after high school for college and or work, as people do when they graduate high school. But Denver was a great place to be. As I got older, when I really became a teenager, late teens, and I started thinking about my life and living independently on my own somewhat, and all, I realized that being in the snow and dealing with Colorado winters, which compared to some of the other states in the country, I realize are not that severe or cold. Okay, I get that. So calm down if you're from Massachusetts or New York or something like that. I get it. Colorado winters can be mild, but even they can still be unpredictable. For someone who's skinny like me and has cerebral palsy and who also relies on a wheelchair for, to get around, and part of that being outdoors and whatnot, you know, there would be some days in Colorado where I would just be like, where I wouldn't be able to go anywhere if I had to do so, independently on my own, right? When I was growing up and in school, it wasn't that big of a problem because, um, I had whatnot and, all that. So it was a completely different ball game. But, um, during my, freshman year of high school, so about 2009, I came out to Florida to see my grandfather for spring break because he was living here at the time, and I just I felt better here. Now, granted, it was spring, early spring, not summer here, but even so, I felt better. Being at like sea level, true sea level. It was nice, not to have to deal with the cold because I remember we had a particular, cold winter that year, and everything was just awesome all the way around. At the time, I remember my parents had been talking about like moving to California after I graduated high school, but they couldn't make the numbers work. So, just kind of casually joking one night, actually, I mentioned Florida, and they actually considered it. And so my mom and stepdad they started doing research and I guess did the calculations and, you know, basically realized that we could make it work. My senior year of high school, I had a pretty difficult choice to make, which was stay in Denver or to go to Florida. Now, to some of you, that might seem like an easy decision to make, but like I said, I did have friends in Denver who I, you know, was close to, and I also had family in Denver. My biological dad and his. And so I honestly, I had to think about it. And I had already been accepted to one of the schools I had applied to in Colorado as well. So that was the other thing. Like I had already been accepted and was planning on and had been planning on going to one of the colleges in Denver or Colorado. And then I was given this choice. Well, I really thought about it and prayed about it, and ultimately I decided to move to Florida because, well, for a couple reasons, honestly. One was the weather and just, the environment that made me feel better. That was a big factor, but that wasn't the only one. Another factor was, I was 18 at the time, and I felt, the call for adventure. And I had lived in Colorado my entire life, and I had wanted to live somewhere new. Um, just have that experience. Obviously, I traveled, as many of you know, I've traveled across the country and been to many places, but I hadn't lived anywhere else other than Colorado up to that point. And so to be able to, move to Florida, but yet have the support of my mom and dad, and a few family members here, the outweighed the cons. And then the third reason was, unfortunately, years of high school, there were things that happened to me. There were things that had, happened, and some events that occurred that basically compelled me to, that basically, compelled me to want to get out of Florida, basically. I mean, out of Colorado. I'm not going to go into detail specifically what those were, but they were the type of situations that would kind of make someone want to have, to seek out a brand new start. And that's exactly what I did when I moved to Florida. I saw Florida as a way to start over, start anew, and really, in a sense, start my life, which I guess, that was the first big decision that I made as an adult, was to move to Florida. Now, I moved to Florida. I took a gap year between high school and college. So from 13, which was when I graduated, to really 2015, actually, I took a gap year. The reason being is because at the time, if you were, if you attended school, if you attended college with out-of-state tuition, it was a lot more expensive to attend school out of state with, out of state tuition, then to wait a year and get in state tuition. And at the time, according to Florida law, I'm not sure if it's this way anymore, but if you started school as an out of state resident, then you paid the tuition rates of an out of state student for your entire college tenure, basically. I don't know if that's changed since then, but that was the law when I was, looking at colleges here. And so I took a gap year, and as it turns out, it was a good thing I did. And as some of you longtime listeners, like long time listeners, know, I did the show from here. I transitioned from doing the Whitfield analysis to relaunching the show as the Whitfield Report here in Florida, almost 10 years ago, actually. So, in a sense, this is also the anniversary of when the reason I'm telling you this, ladies and gentlemen, is, moving to Florida, Florida was an exciting opportunity. The one thing I haven't really shared with too many people up until, this episode is the fact that when I left Colorado, there were people close to me who were angry that I left Colorado. Some friends and some close family members. And to be fair, I can understand their, reasons. But then kind of within that subset of, family and quote-unquote friends, there were even some people who, seemed pretty sure that I was going to fail, not be successful here in Florida. And to be honest, that first gap year for me, ladies and gentlemen, was hard. My first year in Florida was hard, very lonely in a way. I had, friends via, Facebook at the time and Twitter at the time, although social media, like even Facebook and Twitter, were not as prevalent, even 11 years ago as they are now. Like, we were just kind of coming into the smartphone age, really, where everyone was starting to get them, but they weren't quite as prevalent, which in some ways is a good thing in hindsight, I guess. But, I felt lonely for a while, and then I didn't know anyone here, really, for a while. I'm living in this strange, new environment, and, I'll be honest, like, I did have my moments where I felt depressed, and I wonder if I would wonder if I had made mistakes. There were moments where I was like, oh, God, I fucked up. What have I done? I should have stayed in Denver. But at the same time, call it God, call it divinity, whatever. Like, even through all that, I knew I had to be here. I knew that this was the best place for me. Despite what some of the naysayers back in Colorado were saying. And, I spent that first year really reading and getting into political thrillers. That was really the first time when I was 19 where I actually read books outside of school regularly for my own entertainment, amusement. And it was during that time, during that year, where I actually started to write my own fiction stories again. I'd written a few in high school, but this was like my first attempt at writing. And I actually published a quasi short story slash novella called American Instinct that's still up on Amazon today. American Instinct is the book that was, I guess, kind of the pilot for the Shadows of Deception saga. Sorry there, I blanked on the name almost, but that was the first short story slash novella I wrote, American Instinct, which now I'm reusing that name to, kind of, that's my publishing brand, I guess. So it worked out. So the funny thing with American Instinct, the short story, is I wrote it because a friend of mine, Jason Veely, who I'll talk about here in a bit at the end of the show, he had written like a post-apocalyptic, uh, zombie survival novel. And, in hindsight, it's actually pretty good. But, I was writing I had started like writing this spy, fiction thriller novella. And, he and I kind of, made a bit of a friendly bet. I can't remember what we betted now, but it was basically like one of us would try and outsell the other, and I can't remember like what the bet was, but anyway, we had a friendly competition now, and we decided to see which one could outsell the other, and long story short, I outsold him. It was hilarious. The competition we had with each other. I somehow outsold him. Yeah, so that was my first year, and bringing all that up, yeah, I did have some tough times that first year, but I persevered through it. And I know that August for many of you guys can be a time of starting over. And I wanted to just encourage people who might be starting a new path in life to just hang in there and hang on, because times might be tough now. If you can hold on and persevere, it'll be worth it. It really will. Alrighty, and with that, my announcement is that tomorrow night, or I guess tonight, Tuesday, I will be interviewing Jason Veal, who I mentioned earlier, one of the former, well, he's actually starting podcasting again, but he's one of the original podcasters who I started podcasting with, 12 years ago. He and I found each other, and I'm going to be interviewing him tomorrow on the Whitfield Report, but then the episode will air Monday, so, be sure to tune in for that, and then I'll have the Wednesday show as well. Anyway, folks, from all of us for Right to Open Media, God bless, God save this great nation, God, freedom, I see in that order, and I'll see you in the next episode.